Above ground floor. In this movie, we'll be taking a detailed look at the above ground floor section of our pricing sheet. The above ground floor section of our pricing sheet is where we can enter the flooring dimensions for any upper floors that may be required. The job that we're pricing is 2 stories high, so it just has a first floor that will be a timber joist construction. But with the NHE Plus, we can allow for multiple stories. We also have the option for a block and beam flooring construction on the upper floors too. We will be entering in block and beam flooring so we can see how it works, but this will be removed before we leave the above ground floor section of the pricing sheet. Okay, so here at the top we can see the options for timber joist and block and beam. We just tick the flooring options that we need. If there are no upper floors, just untick both the boxes. We will tick both of these. When these boxes are ticked, the NHE Plus switches on and opens up our choices. Let's start with the timber joists. Timber joist bays. Our first floor is constructed of timber joists. Remember, this section is for the upper floor timber joists only. We do not enter the details of any ground floor joists in here. We've already entered our ground floor joists in the ground floor section of the pricing sheet. We're going to use our 5-bedroom house plans. Let's click this info icon. So this is the flooring plan for our upper floor. We're going to break the timber joist flooring up into 5 sections, or bays, like in the picture. We just enter the width of each bay and length of the joist. If we need any clarification on what is meant by this, click the blue info icons and we're provided with a pictorial reference. We can adjust the names of each section, and we can also enter any extra joists that may be needed to make up any doubles or trebles within each bay. Section 2 does have a treble and a double. The treble is near the stairwell and it is running alongside a joist that's already allowed for, so we only need to add 2 extra joists to make this treble up. The double that we need has just missed the joist that's already accounted for, so this will be added in independently, meaning we need 2 additional joists for our double. So we'll enter a total of 4 joists in the blue doubles box. We can change the material by using the drop-down menu like this. The centres for each bay can be changed here. As we enter these measurements, the NHE automatically creates a cutting list for us. The blue text, that's our cutting list, tells us the quantity of joists we'll need for that bay, as well as the length of joist that we'll need. The great thing about this is the programme is working out the length of joist that we'll need based on the lengths of timber that can actually be purchased. The default setting in the programme is based on timber being available in increments of 0.3. We can view more information on this by clicking on this red question mark. If the supplier we use does not use this method, we can adjust the increment in this picture too. We can see that the wastage allowance is 6%, but in this section, the programme knows to override this, so it doesn't add on wastage, it just looks at the length we have entered and rounds it up to the nearest standard length that can be supplied. As mentioned, currently this is based on multiples of 0.3. In the section below, the same process is applied, this being the total number of linear metres of timber that we will need. The programme hasn't added 6% wastage to this. Let's look at section 1. So the programme has used the cutting list, looked at the number of joists required for this bay, which is 19, then multiplied it by the length in the cutting list, 5.1, giving us 96.9 linear metres of timber. Okay, so to enter the timber joists for the upper floors, we just complete the red boxes for each section or bay, enter any doubles, check the yellow boxes, and the programme takes care of the rest. Additional joists. We do have the option to open up additional joist sections. By default, we're provided with the ability to enter up to 6 bays or sections of joist. If we're doing multiple upper floors, or if the upper floor we're doing has more than 6 bays, just tick this box. We're provided with a further 6 bays, giving us the option to enter in up to 12 bays or sections. They work in exactly the same way as the timber joist bays we've already entered. So we just complete the red boxes for each section, or bay, enter any doubles, and check the yellow boxes. If, for example, a 3-storey build is being priced, and a second upper floor is required, we may require the additional joist section if the default 6 bays aren't enough. We'll just enter the dimensions of the second upper floor. We may wish to change the titles of the sections to something that indicates which floor level the bay is for. Trimmers and other joists. If there are any trimmers or any other joists, we can allow for them. We just click this button The programme opens this section of the pricing sheet for us. We just check the material that's been selected and enter in the quantity required in linear metres. We do need to allow for a trimmer on our job, so let's put in 2 linear metres here. All of the costs for this are calculated for us. We don't have any other trimmers or joists, but if we did, we would just repeat this process. Timber joist items. As we've entered the measurements for all our joists, the programme has automatically worked out the associated items for these for us. Let's take a look at what's been calculated. The restraint straps have been automatically worked out. The quantity required is shown here. Let's click on the red question mark and view how the programme has calculated this. The programme is set to allow for restraint straps and centre strutting if the span of the bay is greater than 2.4 linear metres. We can adjust this measurement if required. Restraint strap noggins are here. So this is the noggins underneath the restraint straps. We can see how they're being worked out. As it's a yellow box, we can adjust this length if we want. There are lots of options for the centre strutting, and changing it to our preferred choice is really simple. We can use the drop-down menus on the pricing sheet, or click the question mark. The interactive picture provides a visual explanation of the available choices. So herringbone timber, solid noggins, or herringbone steel. Just click on the one we want. We're going to be using solid noggins, but let's take a look at the other options first. We'll click herringbone lumber. We need to choose the material. We'll select 38 by 38 treated softwood. Enter it in. Pricing sheet instantly adjusts, and we can see the quantity and cost information for our choice. Let's change this and look at the herringbone steel band. Again, we just click the picture, choose the material. We'll select steel band perforated 20mm. Again, enter it in. It's all worked out. Let's just change this back to the solid noggins. We'll select 38 by 150mm treated softwood. Enter it in. Everything's calculated. It's so fast to see the costs associated with the different options. As we've entered doubles and trebles, the bolts are worked out. This is based on the bolts being used every 0.6 linear metres. We can change this if we want. We have a blue box for joist hangers, so our judgment is needed. If there are any joists going onto trimmers, just enter the quantity of joist hangers needed in here. We'll enter 4. Masonry joist hangers for the ends of the joists have been automatically worked out. When this option is switched on, the programme allows for a hanger on each end of every joist. If the joists on the upper floors are running into the actual walls, we can switch this option off by clicking this button. If we switch this option off because the joists are being built into the walls, then the masonry joist hangers' costs and quantities will be removed. We'll also need to enter in any deduction that needs to be made to the floor area, as the actual floor area will be less than the joist bays. If a deduction is entered into this yellow box, it will not take effect on the area of joist bays, but it will reduce the following items. So the flooring, ceilings and any ceiling finishes like plasterboard, plastering, decorating, and any insulation. The plans that we're working from require us to do a combination of things with our upper floor joist hangers and floor area. There is a very detailed explanation of what we're about to do in the ground floor movie section, so in this movie we'll just be adjusting the details. We need to enter a deduction to the actual floor area of 3.3. This deduction is greater than the one we made to the ground floor area, and it's because a lot of the masonry walls on our upper floors are going up through the joists. We also won't require 55 of the masonry joist hangers that have been automatically allowed for our upper floor bays. This is because a lot of the joists are sitting on the internal partition walls, so we'll reduce these too by overtyping the quantity that's been automatically calculated. The NHE Plus enables us to really drill into the detail for our joist flooring structure and achieve complete accuracy. Going through this process, though, is of course optional. It may be that if it's a small job, this degree of accuracy isn't necessary, as the differentials may be negligible and accounted for as wastage. But nevertheless, we have the options available if we want to use them. The battens for setting out, as well as the fixings, are worked out. Nothing's forgotten, and we can see how these have been worked out and adjust the settings for these fixings by clicking on the red question marks. Block and beam bays. The job we're pricing doesn't require any block and beam on the upper floors, but we're going to take a look at how it works. The block and beam section is open. This is because we ticked the box at the top of the above ground floor section to switch it on. See, if we untick this box, it closes the block and beam down and switches it off. Let's retick that. We aren't going to remove the timber joist details we've already entered. These are the actual measurements for the job we're pricing. But we will use these same measurements for the block and beam. Before we leave the above ground floor section of the pricing sheet, all of the block and beam details we're about to enter will be removed. OK, so this works in a real similar way to the timber joist that we've just looked at. We just enter the width of the bay and the length of the beams. We can adjust the name of each bay if we wish, and we can use the drop-down menu to select the material. The programme then automatically calculates the area of block and beam that will be required for each bay in metres square. We can see this here in the blue text. We can also see the total area of block and beam that we will require for all of the bays here. This is again shown in metres square. Here we can see the costs for each bay. This is calculated on a square metre price to reflect the way that block and beam is purchased. So this cost includes both the blocks and beam. We can't change the material selected here. We do need to go back to where we entered the details for the bay and use the drop-down list to select a different type of block and beam. Or we can add our own block and beam, square metre based quotes, to the material library. Additional block and beam. We do have the option to open up additional block and beam sections. By default, we're provided with the ability to enter up to 6 bays or sections of block and beam flooring. If we're doing multiple upper floors, or if the upper floor we're doing has more than 6 bays, just tick this box. We're provided with a further 6 bays, giving us the option to enter in up to 12 bays or sections. They work in exactly the same way as the block and beam bays we've already entered, so we just complete the red boxes for each section or bay. If, for example, a 3-storey build is being priced and a second upper floor is required, we may require the additional block and beam sections if the default 6 bays isn't enough. We just enter the dimensions for the second upper floor, but we may wish to change the titles of the sections to something that indicates which floor level the bay is on. Block and beam items. Here we can see the cement for our block and beam. By default it's a 3-in-1 mix, but we can change it if we want. Just use the drop-down menu. We can see that the hours and labour for this have been allowed for in the block and beam. The sand is here. Again, the material quantity and cost is shown, but like the cement, the hours and labour cost are included in the block and beam. Any air vents for the block and beam are entered in here. It is a blue box, so our judgment is required. If any are needed, just enter in the quantity. The teleporter also has a blue box. If one is required for the upper floor block and beam bays, enter the number of days it will be needed for, and all the costs will be calculated. The disc cutter and its discs have been worked out for us. We can click on the red question marks for both of these items. We can see how the programme is performing its calculation, and if we want, we can fine-tune the details. Lastly, we have the cement mixer. Nothing's forgotten, and the blue text tells us that delivery and collection has been allowed for. The job that we're pricing doesn't have any block and beam in the upper floors, so we'll now remove the details that we've entered. Extra row and totals. The above ground floor section does contain all of the common and not so common items and tasks that may be required, but if we need something that isn't listed, we do have the option to add in an extra row or rows. Just click the extra row button. We don't need an extra row. Adding one in is really straightforward. For more information on this, just click the blue info icon. The totals for the above ground floor section are here. We can see the breakdowns for the plant, materials, hours and labour. And the overall total is here. These totals are all cost. Markups and VAT are added when we get to the summary report.